And here we go. So welcome everybody to QuickBooks Online Quarterly Update. This is the quarterly update for Q1 2024 of the Advanced Webinar Series hosted by yours truly, Hector Garcia. I will put the links to the slides. Let me copy and paste that really quick and put that in the slides because a lot of people would like to follow along in the while the webinar is going on, even though you actually don't need to because it's on the screen. But there's links and stuff like that that we make references to in the slide, so make sure you have that. So I went into the chat, I copy and pasted a link. You can view the live slides if you want. The table of contents for today, we'll spend about 30 minutes or so talking about industry related news. So they're not things directly related with QuickBooks Online, but things related to QuickBooks Intuit and maybe things going on in my world. Then we're going to talk about QuickBooks Online, all specific new features added to QuickBooks Online. We'll name them real quick. We have a new income tax tab for sole proprietors, which was ported over from QuickBooks Online, over from QuickBooks Self-Employed, and we'll have a discussion around that. There's two huge updates to QuickBooks Online bank feeds. One is they're no longer suggesting transfers, which is should be something that should evoke standing ovations and high-fiving and dancing and champagne bottle popping from the accounting community, because transfers have always been a thorn on our thigh or whatever the expression is. And then also added this really interesting bulk edit inside categorized transactions in bank feeds, which is a really strange place to expect bulk edits, but that's an interesting thing too. They added QuickBooks, 1099 corrections in QuickBooks Online, which I actually did one a couple of days ago. It worked pretty interesting. There's a new partnership with Mineral, which is changing the HR assisted center for the people that have payroll. And they've added balance sheet by budget. So that's strictly the QuickBooks Online section. That doesn't imply QuickBooks Online Accountant or QuickBooks Online Advanced. In QuickBooks Online Accountant, they added the new Client App Center, which I think is pretty cool. One dashboard so you can see all your clients' apps that are connected in one shot. And in QuickBooks Online Advanced, they added the new forecasting feature, some new reports for project costing, and some enhancements to revenue recognition. So let's go to get started. Let me introduce my friend Matthew, who's going to be co-hosting with me today. Matthew has a business called Parkway Business Solutions, also has a YouTube channel, recently posted about 2.5 hour video on the entire QBO setup process, which I commend him for it. I think it's a really great video to check out from his channel. And he's a member of the Trainer Writer Network, a top 100 pro advisor, Intuit Trainer Writer Network, and has his own community in Facebook called QB Community Live, which I recommend that you check that out. So Matthew, thank you for joining us. Let's jump right into it and industry related news. I'm going to make one quick plug to come down to either New York on April 17th for my one-day mini conference. It's actually a one-day summary of the 2.5-day conference I did with my brother Carlos down in Miami last year. It's $475. It's 50 attendees max. It's in Midtown. It's in the ADP office, actually, in the ADP sales office by the Penn Station by Madison Square Garden. So you can find information about the New York one-day event there. And if you want to come to the big conference in Fort Lauderdale, which is about 10 minutes from the Fort Lauderdale airport, about 35 minutes or so from the Miami airport, that's going to be in October. That's the 2.5-day conference, which is called Influential Conversations for Accountants. It's capped to 200 attendees. There are multiple early bird discounts available. I'm going to set all those coupons up at the end of the webinar. So right after the webinar ends, I'm going to set those coupons up because I just revamped the early birds for the conference. So it's $1,800 if you book after April, and there's a 30, 20, and 10% off coupon if you book by February, March, or April. So then check it out after this webinar, reframe2024.com, or email me if you have any questions.
This is the most exciting event I'm planning for all year, hands down. It's my biggest conference I'm guaranteed to go to. I know a lot of people are going, so it's going to be awesome. Just want to put that plug in.
It's awesome. So thank you, Matt, for supporting and coming and hang out. Alicia, I know she's coming too. And a few people from the chat are saying they're coming. The other quick plug I want to make, if you haven't subscribed to our unofficial QuickBooks Accountants podcast, These quarterly webinars are great. Once a quarter, we have tons of content, tons of things to cover, but sometimes things happen between quarters. As things happen between weeks, actually. So the nice thing about having a weekly podcast is that Alicia and I get to like have a place where we just chat about everything that's coming out in a weekly basis. So check that out. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe with your favorite podcast platform. Let's talk about the things that are happening in the QuickBooks Online world. First, recently, a couple of days ago, we got an email saying that on May 6th, all QBO SKUs or all versions of QBO, including Plus and Advanced, because they've already started doing this at the end of last year, and sort of it's been happening through 2024 as well for the Simple Start and Essentials clients. But through May 26, QuickBooks hopes, or they announced anyway, that they will have everybody fully 100% moved to the new invoice layout, which is I'll rather say it. It's not very attractive to accountants. It's missing fields. The functionality doesn't feel as fast as the old design. Also, the old design wasn't really that good in the first place. I mean, like QuickBooks Desktop had like much more smoother sort of shift tab, move around fields type of feel. But so it's not like we're going from a BMW to a Ford Pinto. Like we're going from I would say like a Ford Taurus to a Ford Pinto. So we're going from a bad thing to a little bit worse thing. Okay. But for end users, it turns out, and a lot of Intuit employees have confirmed this for me, is that end users like it. Like the small business owners, the QuickBooks users that are not accountants, they like the new invoice layout. Maybe it's more friendly. Maybe it feels more accessible. As a matter of fact, they have numbers to report this. They have X amount of QBO companies in terms of how much they were using invoicing versus the ones that were using the old invoicing. They have proven that the QBO companies with the new design are more likely to use invoices versus that. And a big company like Intuit, they're not gonna like listen to accountants and say, do you think it's pretty? Do you think it's comfortable? Do you think it's better? They don't give two craps what you think. They care about the numbers. They care about what the results bring. And apparently the numbers have proven that the new design, it brings in the higher percentage usage rate for invoices. And understand that why
that leads to merchant processing too, right, Hector? So for them, that leads to merchant processing, more revenues, everything else.
I was about to get there. The reason why QuickBooks cares about whether people are using invoices or not is because the more invoices, the more touch points to say, hey, activate the merchant processing, receive a payment via Visa or MasterCard or whatever, and they get a cut of that too. So that's really the crux of it. That's why they want to have a bigger percentage of people using invoices. So anyway.
So the one other thing real quick on that I think as accountants, we need to be cognizant of. I know we don't like it, but try to get to like it, because the last thing we want is two different versions that end up becoming one version later on down the road, if we think about business versus accountant view on dashboards. So we got to learn to like the new stuff, I think, right?
Yeah. If you don't get used to this now, May 6th will be hell. Basically, that's what Matthew is saying. It's gonna be hell. So you get used to it as an accountant, and if you're a small business owner, you gotta get used to it too. Now, next big announcement, and this is kind of old, but it happened during the last quarter, is by July 2024, QuickBooks Online is moving all reports. Another, forcing you to use a new system, all reports to the new modernized report system. But the challenge is, and I get that, so that means that when you go run a P&L, a transaction detail report, whatever, it will default to the new system. The big question here is, and I don't have the answer to this, is will classic reports still exist as a backup just in case something doesn't work for a while? We don't know. So I don't know if July 2024 means all gets defaulted to modernized and classic gets killed. I don't know if it means it all shows modernized, but you could still access classic if you happen to know the direct URL, which for right tool users, you understand exactly what that means. You already have a database of all the reports that you can directly access by knowing the URL. And unfortunately, the new modernized report system doesn't have direct URL. So there's really no way to even create a database of the new modernized reports especially after you customize them, because there's no, in URL customization. So for us too, for me as a power user, as a person that has made a living building workarounds and shortcuts to working with QuickBooks faster, this new reports interface is really horrible for for someone like me. So I'm not looking forward to July 2024 either, but I do wish the classic reports stay alive as a backup for a while. Matthew, you had a comment on that?
So I'm wondering if it has something to do with security, right? Because the ability to manipulate URLs is not as as secure of an environment. So maybe there's something to do with that. But it'll just be a bit of time till we find some workaround, some way to get behind the scenes in a sense. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And then the other announcement that came out in the last quarter or so is on July 2024, another July 2024 deadline, that will be the last time for brand new QuickBooks Pro Premier subscribers to start a new subscription. So if you're already using Pro or Premier, or Enterprise is not being affected by this, and Accountant Edition is not being affected by this, but the Pro Premier subscriptions that are current, they're paying the annual fee. Those will continue to work until QuickBooks decides to completely kill Pro Premier, which is obviously in the horizon. So new subscribers only. So brand new people to Pro Premier subscriptions, those will be the only ones affected past July 2024. Otherwise, people can just continue paying their annual renewal and they will be just fine. And that also includes payroll, of course, so QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Desktop payroll. Also, Chase now imports statements in QBO bank feeds. So starting January 2024, I started noticing that the bank statements import from Chase connections. What I haven't seen is check images or deposit images yet. I've only seen the import statements, which is weird because it's the biggest bank in America. But back in October or November in QuickBooks Connect, Intuit announced some new partnership with Chase. So I assume this is what they mean. Partnership means it actually works now when you try to connect it. So, but I know other banks have done check images for a while, and some have even done deposit images. But with Chase specifically, I haven't seen check images. And also, they've announced, and I've seen this kind of inconsistent across multiple QBO files, but they announced that in February 2024, they were discontinuing cash flow projections inside QBO, that little cash flow projections section that nobody used, and that's why they're discontinuing, because it had very low usage rate. They're discontinuing it, and I've seen some files that have it, some files that don't. Not sure exactly if there's a hard date for them killing it completely from all QBO files, but essentially this is a feature that QuickBooks has decided to put to bed and put to sleep forever. Now, recently, Intuit announced that they will be selling TurboTax actively to QuickBooks users, right? And the challenge with this is that they've always passively, maybe sent an email here and there or a postcard, but there never was an in-product, hey, do you need your taxes done by QuickBooks, or which actually really means TurboTax, okay? And there's a link to the announcement. But what this is going to look like is inside your QuickBooks Online, you're gonna get a little pop-up that says, are you ready to file taxes? And it'll ask you one key question. Does your accountant file your annual business taxes for you? And then you're gonna say, no, I file it myself. And if you answer no, if you answer no, I'll file it myself, they're gonna go through with creating a TurboTax, a free TurboTax account for you, okay, where you can start filling in the information and go through and file your return if you want to. If you say yes, the accountant files it for me, then it won't go through and create a TurboTax account for you. So this is TurboTax, but they're calling it QuickBooks Live Tax. So they're attaching the branding of QuickBooks Live Bookkeeping to QuickBooks Live Tax, because the plan over the next couple of years is to offer full service tax preparation, not just here's how you can do it yourself or with the assisted, but the plan is to eventually offer full service tax preparation. So a bunch of us were in a call with some Intuit leaders, and we were going back and forth in terms of the logic behind this. And the big question was, and I'm going to go back a couple of years, I'm going to go back 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when QuickBooks Live Bookkeeping was created, the big question was, hey, are you going to be offering bookkeeping to my clients? I'm their pro advisor attached to the account. And they say, no, absolutely not. Now, from there to now, many people have received an offer for live bookkeeping, even when their accountant has been attached. Every QuickBooks leader this has been sent to has replied with, hey, this was a glitch. It wasn't meant to happen. It escaped through the cracks or whatever, but the damage is done already. Now, it was interesting. They kind of changed this time around. Instead of us trying to say, hey, can we make sure that our QuickBooks clients that have an accountant attached to them do not get this? And they point blank said, nope, we don't care if it has an accountant attached to it. We're going to offer tax services anyway. And of course, there was a huge uproar, but the logic wasn't broken. They came back and said, hey, the reality is not all pro advisors, not all accountants attached to QuickBooks are the ones that prepare the tax return. And not all of them are the ones that actually prepare the tax return themselves. So it's not 100% obvious that because an accountant is attached to a file, that they shouldn't be offering you tax services. But if you look at this screen closely, Matt, I don't know if you caught this, but this is actually my QuickBooks Online file that is actually my firm. This is my firm, an accounting firm on QuickBooks
Client overview
Online,
on the side. Yep.
Logged in as QuickBooks Online accountant. I'm being offered this. So this tells you right off the bat that their strategy is not to tiptoe around, okay, make sure that accountant attached don't get that. They said point blank, we're going to offer tax services to everybody that has QuickBooks.
I actually prefer that than the whoopsie. Just be flat out and say what you're doing. It's easier.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that it's happening, but I prefer that they're upfront about it. Absolutely. So when you say, no, I do the taxes myself, it will ask you what type of business you have. And I believe that some of these entities are not available yet for the walkthrough, for the workflow. When you do pick the entity that they do cover, so in this case, in my test, the only one that showed this page was S Corps and partnerships. Then it shows this page showing you that, hey, we'll prepare your tax return. It feels like it's full service because it says expert, approved, guarantee, all this stuff. And also the price is $17.49, right? So I would not make the assumption that this is not do-it-yourself tax return. This is full service tax. It says it right there, full service tax. I personally have not gone through what that looks like, so I couldn't tell you how full is the service or how much service there's in the service and how much is there of you typing and somebody doing it for you. But long story short, if you're a QuickBooks Online user, you will be marketed to and you will be sold a full service tax preparation product. I believe that for sole proprietorship, that's going to be sort of self-serve or assisted. And for these partnerships and S Corps, it's going to be full serve. Yes, Matthew?
Quick attention to small print at the bottom. It looks like you're an accountant for this business. Have the business owner visit QuickBooks Live Tax for filing support. Super tiny small print there.
Yeah, but still, it's kind of weird. Like, why is it even telling me that? Yeah, but that's good. I mean, it's good that it's a lot clearer. Like, I'm just giving you guys the clear picture of what's happening. Okay, moving on from that. In the last quarterly webinar, we talked about this product called Assistant Bookkeeping, which is $50 a month. And it basically is tech support, but the people in tech support know a little bit more about bookkeeping. I don't know, how much they know. I don't know what kind of credentials they have, but they know enough to actually support someone through the decision making of how to book this. Is it a debit? Is it a credit? Tech support will never tell you that's a debit, that's a credit, because tech support is how do you press buttons to get to where you want to be, but nothing has to do with categorization. Nothing has to do with, is it a debit or a credit, or we should apply this payment. So anything that has to do with affecting the accounting, that's something that support has never done. And they're experimenting with this thing called live assisted bookkeeping. And I'm not 100% sure if they're using the same staff that does the bookkeeping, or they're using like more accounting trained support people, or maybe somewhere in between. And for the people that pay this extra $50 a month, they're going to get a little bit better support. And what I noticed that was really interesting is for Plus and Advanced customers, they're giving the first 30 days for free. So we're going to have a lot more people kind of testing this, a lot of more customers testing this, and they're going to, I guess we'll get more reports as to how good this is. If you want to create a QBO account and pay the $45 for 1 month and get a free trial of this, just for you to understand what QBO users are going to experience through, could be a good experiment, right? Because I'll give you a better idea for what you might be compared against, right? As a consultant, pro advisor, whatever your role is. Okay. If you have nothing to add, I'll jump right into showing you a brand new product that Intuit literally launched yesterday. Yesterday is February 21st, 2024. So QuickBooks launched a brand new product called Solopreneur. It's not available in the accountant portal. It's only for end users. It's $20 a month. Okay, actually, let's go into the website really quick. So I'm just going to type QuickBooks Solopreneur, go straight into the landing page. And what this used to be is a product, or let me take this back. This is a replacement of a product that used to be called QuickBooks Self-Employed. QuickBooks Self-Employed still exists. Customers still have it, but QuickBooks is no longer selling QuickBooks Self-Employed to new users. Okay, so all the old users will stay in QuickBooks Self-Employed with all its limitations and what it can do and what it can't do. And then brand new customers that were the same target customer that was QuickBooks Self-Employed are now going to be sold QuickBooks Solopreneur. So QuickBooks Solopreneur is, if you look at the plans and pricing, is a $20 a month product. It can still be purchased via this, first 3 months 50% discount. What they are advertising is track profitability. That means income and expenses. Separate business and personal. That was very unique from QuickBooks Self-Employed, where you have like a P&L for your personal stuff and a P&L for the business stuff. It works a little bit different though, and I'll show you. I have an account that I can show you. You can do invoices, you can do estimates, you can accept payments, the merchant services, you can add on to that. This is the kicker here. Get expert tax help. That means that this is also a conduit for TurboTax. Okay. Then we have this automatic mileage tracking. That means the same mileage tracking you get with QuickBooks Online Simple Start. Set and track growth goals. I actually don't know what this is. I have no clue what this is. This might be the dashboard. I don't know what this is. Sales tax. And then the ability for you to open QuickBooks checking. So I'm going to switch over to QuickBooks, to my QuickBooks Online Self-Employed account. And I think, Matthew, you haven't seen this, and probably you didn't even know about, the developments of Solopreneur. But or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you don't consulting on this.
I knew about it and looked at like basic stuff that you could find online, but I have not played with it at all.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up, and I'm gonna walk you through what this is, so you can react to all these things on the fly. So the very first thing, which it's been skipped, okay, because I already created the account. Very first thing that I want to point out, I don't have a screenshot on this. I don't think I do anyway. Is that when I was going through the setup process, it actually asked me to upload my current spreadsheet. So it asked me like, how do you do your books now? Let me see if I happen to, here it is. I recorded it yesterday. So I have it here. Hopefully is that pretty clear, Matthew? So as I was going through the setup process, it actually asked me, do you use a spreadsheet to track your books now? And it said, upload your spreadsheet so we can pull business info to get started. Okay, let me tell you what this is. This is Intuit gathering a spreadsheet of however people managed their books before, using Gen AI, let's call it ChatGPT, but it's probably their own, maybe a combination between ChatGPT and their own. And they're trying to determine certain pieces of information from the spreadsheet. And then based on the stuff they read in the spreadsheet, they'll walk you through the next steps. Now, I uploaded a spreadsheet that contains a bunch of expenses. I had some account categories. And again, anybody's spreadsheet could look completely different. Like this is the part where I am not 100% sure how in the world will QuickBooks even like know what to do with these things. I'm gonna give you an idea of I'll just exit out of this for a second. I uploaded this spreadsheet here, which is, and again, it's whatever, it's what I had available at the moment. But this is like a little, like a Schedule C form that I have with like all the categories that go in a Schedule C. And then it's part of a video I'm going to create later on in the future and walk people through like how to do their own accounting without QuickBooks, and a bunch of transactions and a bunch of like drop down for categories is something I'm starting to experiment with. So I uploaded this file to see, okay, let's see what QuickBooks does with this. And then they came back like through the process. All they did was say, hey, it looks like you spent $19.99 in Adobe. That's an expense. Make sure you categorize that as a business expense. And that's it. There was no beginning balance. There was no specific bank accounts. There was no like chart of accounts customization. So I'm not 100% sure where they're going with this. Hey, upload your spreadsheet so we can figure out what's going on. But it's exciting nonetheless to see like the software like attempt to do stuff with people's custom things, right? So that's exciting. That's exciting and something to think about, because in many ways, software companies are going to go in this direction. Like most people go from a spreadsheet or a Word doc to whatever the automation software is. And it'll be really interesting if the software companies can start to learn about this transition of going from a manual system to a digitized system, and to see what it used to look like. Because when I do QuickBooks consulting, that's what we do. We do walkthroughs. We kind of watch people work, watch people print the paper and move the paper and sign the paper and get a stamp on the paper and put a post-it note on the paper and scan the paper and archive the paper. You watch people go through that, and you get an understanding for what the world looks like. And then you can say, hey, you can do it this way in QuickBooks. You can scan it this way in QuickBooks. You can run this report to monitor it this way in QuickBooks. So you try to mimic a little bit of, kind of like meet them where they are sort of thing. So I find interesting that they're attempting to do this, but I'm unhappily to report that it doesn't do anything. You upload the spreadsheet, it really doesn't do anything. Okay, anyway, so the first thing you'll see is you see the familiar QuickBooks logo on the top left. You don't see the word solopreneur. You don't see the word self-employed. I like that. It's just QuickBooks. It's got the new button, but it's a very short new button. So the menu only has the ability for you to create estimates, invoices, add customers, and add products and services. Notice that there's no vendors, there's no expense check, bills, there's no chart of accounts, there's no journal entry, none of that, because this is actually in the front face, in the fascia, like in the part that the customer sees. This is not an accounting software. So they're actually hiding all the accounting mechanics that happen behind the scenes. But I've been playing with this enough to tell you that this is actually normal run-of-the-mill QuickBooks Online. It has a chart of accounts. It has all that, but you don't see it. Like the business owner is not designed to see it. Next thing you'll see is under transactions, and this is different. This is basically the bank register and bank feeds, and I would say almost like the chart of accounts all in once. I know it's kind of weird. So imagine if you were to take your chart of accounts, your register, and your bank feeds, make it all one screen, and that's it. So all your transactions are essentially locked into this page. When you first load the transactions, they're automatically categorized. So it's not like they're waiting for you to categorize it. It comes in and it gets categorized. Done. You don't get a choice. You don't get asked. It doesn't watch your previous patterns. It doesn't have bank rules. It doesn't learn from your behavior. Maybe possibly it takes your industry, and based on the industry, contextually uses AI to categorize it. Maybe. Honestly, I don't know. I haven't used it enough. But you get to see, like, for example, Walgreens, it categorized it to personal expense, Firehouse Subs, personal expense. Comcast, it put it to phone. It put it into this category called phone over $200. I don't know where they come up with these things. Barnes & Nobles is personal. Carrot Express is travel, and that's a restaurant, and that's not travel. I don't know how it came up with that. Well, I guess it's travel meals. And then we have Memorial Hospital that went to visit, co-pays, and prescriptions. That's a personal account. And notice that there's a little thing, personal and business, right next to it. So what's different about Solopreneur than the regular QuickBooks is when you actually click on one of these transactions, you get this drop-down menu that looks like a chart of accounts, but it's actually not a chart of accounts. It's actually a customer version, layman friendly non-accountant, end user friendly parallel account that in the background is mapped to a chart of accounts. Okay. And I learned this the hard way because I've been using a lot of my direct links to see if I can get to certain reports and certain things. And I've been able to see behind the QuickBooks has done a good job at hiding a lot of these things, but I've been able to see under the hood and see what this looks like. Also, these things are off in alphabetical order. So they kind of resemble like one of those books you buy at Barnes and Nobles, 1,000 tax deductions, and they're all like in alphabetical order. So it kind of like resembles that. So anything that's under this business heading, those are all going to be your tax deductions per se. And all of these things are mapped in the back end to a chart of accounts. We don't have access yet to what that looks like. What's kind of cool, I like this, it has a little I button that gives you an explanation right under it. So I don't know if you've noticed, Matt, but in a regular QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop, you have accounts and you have account descriptions. But the descriptions are not really useful, like in the actual day-to-day data entry. But in here, you can click on this little I and kind of get a little cheat sheet under it, telling you what this is or what this could be. That's really good. I love that. I love it. I don't need
what
it
I'm
as an
wondering
accountant,
is, so
but, I like that.
you can upgrade this, right? But I'm wondering what's it going to look like if you take this data in this format and you actually upgrade to a different level. What's it going to look like for that old historical data in the future?
Right, because this stuff maps to the chart of accounts. All these things are really being booked to the actual account. There's only like a front end.
Yeah.
So imagine, like the best way to picture it is a tag. Imagine this is a tag, and this tag is mapped to a chart of accounts. So it's a different data point, or completely separate data point altogether. So that's pretty interesting. And notice I'm not like accepting. I'm not saying like yes or save. Like none of this stuff is really happening. Like I'm changing these things on the fly with like, with no sense of like, concentration or whatever. All these things are happening on the fly. The other thing that I noticed is that this little toggle here, where you go from personal to business, you see that? So if you toggle it to business transaction, it will categorize it into one of the business accounts. And if you toggle it to personal, it will categorize it into equity accounts that are already pre-built into the chart of accounts. So they did this very smart. Instead of creating personal and business as two separate classes per se, the way self-employed was doing it, they did it all to adhere to core QuickBooks Online elements. And the reason for that is because I think that long-term, we're going to be able to move or evolve from Solopreneur to Simple Start and so forth, okay? There's also here in the Get Paid section, I'm going to create a new invoice, and you're going to see a super familiar, same exact invoice infrastructure that you get with QBO Simple Start and above, with the difference that you can't add custom fields, but everything else, it's in here, including sales tax and all that stuff. So that's great. So there's no different things to learn. When you go to estimates, you go create an estimate. Again, it uses the new format for estimates too, which is great. So this one's starting right off the bat with the new format. And you also get the full products and services page. The only difference is when you create a new product and service, they are calling non-inventory. They're just calling it product. There's no inventory items here. There's just service, product. There's no bundles. So there's only non-inventory and service. So behind the scenes, that's what's happening. And then when you go create it, you can check whether you sell this to a customer, and there isn't a check on whether or not you purchase these, because there's no item level, job costing, or anything like that in here. But you get the full spectrum of how same thing as when you create items in a QBO, and you also have categories, which is pretty cool as well. Okay. All right, that's products and services. Under customers, you get your customer database, just like QuickBooks Online. You get to create new customers. You get to import customers, which is interesting. There's no vendor section. As of now, self-employed is not tracking any vendor information. Actually, when you go back to transactions, if you look at this thing called Carrot Express, notice I can add an exclamation mark to that, or I can add a bunch of text and just click out of that. And essentially the vendors are just memos. Okay, so there's no formal vendor database, which means there's no vendor duplication, which means there's no like, hey, what's your vendor's address? So they're making it super duper simple for the end user, not to have to think about this too much when it comes to categorizing stuff. So again, no formal chart of accounts with assets, liabilities, and terminology that people that end users don't understand. No vendor list to choose. You could have essentially a transaction quote with nothing here. Oh, does it let me? Oh, it doesn't let me do nothing. I love that. So even though like how QBO lets you do things without pays, so this one requires you for you to do something. But it could be any hunk of garbage you want. And unfortunately, one thing I really disliked about this is that you can open it, and then you can see what it looks like, but there's no like sort of undo or like fix the pays or whatever in general. And the other thing I didn't see is attachments. I didn't see any ability to do any sort of attachments here. And then let's go into reports. You get 5 reports. Okay, you get profit and loss by customer, which actually technically makes 0 sense because there's no expense by customer. So profit and loss by customer makes no sense, but there is a profit and loss by customer nonetheless. So essentially you get to see that. I don't know if did I do any invoices? I haven't done an invoice by customer yet. Let me do an invoice really quick. Let's do Carlos here and we'll pick an item. Okay, so sales by customer, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I completely see a world where a sales by customer would be a useful thing. But if I do a profit and loss by customer, and what's interesting is there's a cash and accrual toggle, which not very conducive to solopreneurship, non-accounting sort of thing, but it's there, which is interesting. And then here's my income for the customer. So you do get income by customer, but there's never going to be a conduit, or at least from the infrastructure that it has now, a conduit for you to ever have an expense by customer, because there's no customer drop-down menu anywhere. So I don't know why we would need a profit and loss by customer anyway, but it is what it is. We can move on. There's a profit and loss by month, but again, it's got the same customizability that QBO has. So you can make this by customer, by vendor, which would do nothing because there's no vendors, of course. But you can do by week, by month. It says it has here the tag option, but there's no tags in self-employed. In solopreneur anyway. So you get the regular P&L, of course, and then you can go into any of the details. And then what's interesting about the details, and this kind of starts with modernized, just like QBO, allows you to switch to classic view. So you see that essentially it's using the same mechanics, same under the hood process that QBO has. You can switch to classic view, but there's nothing under names, and that's on purpose. So everything is going to be through memo or description. So if you were to group by, in this case, name or vendor, it's never going to work because there's no vendors being tracked. And again, I'm going down a rabbit hole where the average small business owner wouldn't even care about. Like most of the audience here watching these webinars are accounting professionals, so they care about this stuff because I care about this stuff because I lose sleep over these things, so that's why we're going deep into these things. Then we have the income tax. So this is a gift from the QuickBooks Online self-employed world, from QuickBooks Self-Employed, which essentially, because it is assumed that these are Schedule C customers, so LLCs, single member LLCs, or sole props, there will be a need to understand what your tax liability is based on your income and expenses. And what's really neat about this is when you go into deductions and you click on this drop down, you click on tax profile, you set up, whether you're single, married, and again, this is all a copy from what self-employed had for years. So you get to enter your personal information here, where you are. Then it adds that up with your QuickBooks Solopreneur information, and then it allows you it gives you an estimate and says, hey, based on this, we calculated this is going to be your estimated tax. And of course, that goes hand in hand with then being able to, at some point, I'm sure there'll be a big button here that says save money on taxes, use TurboTax or something like that, and take it to that workflow. And there's sales tax, of course, because there's invoices. There's your standard mileage you get with all QBO, and then you get, surprisingly, you get QuickBooks checking, and I'm sure that at some point you'll get loans and that sort of thing. So one more thing, I'll click on the gear menu, and there's one thing that you don't get in QBO, regular QBO, is you get this little thing that says home office info, and essentially you tell it what your square footage is, if it's a simplified method or regular method, and it will try to calculate what is your percentage deductible from your home office expenses. I don't know how this flows through the P&L. I still don't know how that works yet, but it seems like they're starting to build a mechanism to kind of unify a tax preparation and self-employed solopreneur sort of Schedule C accounting. So, and there's also healthcare here, which I don't know what that is. I haven't even clicked on that. Doesn't seem to do anything. That's probably them selling you self-insurance. I mean, self-employed self-insurance, self-employed health insurance at some point, and it's your standard export data. If you're gonna close out your QBO Solopreneur, you can export your reports to Excel just like you can with QBO. There is this thing called Download Tax Summary, which should feel familiar if you ever use self-employed, which is basically this report that shows your income deductions, the vehicle information, the home office deduction, and I guess the tax preparer would decide what they'll do with this, and then all of the balance sheet type of transactions. So these are categories that were linked to like fixed assets and that sort of thing. So it's pretty interesting. A lot for you to think about. Matt, I'll let you react to all this.
I mean, the one thing I like is they're finally putting everything onto a single platform. So you have the ability, as I was making the comments, that you can actually upgrade, right? So that's a nice thing. You can actually have somebody that gets into this environment, and it can lead to us having new clients down the road. There are certain little nuanced things, like if you can't have names, don't show it in reports, is what I would say. And I'm a little concerned on the business versus personal, just the way that's done. But overall, at least it's almost like training wheels for some of this stuff for QuickBooks Online. It's going to help get people moved into that environment and ready for us, I think. You're muted. One thing on this one, this is the only one you cannot connect apps to, but Ledger, which I know you're going to cover, Ledger, you can still connect third-party apps.
Right. So I won't cover Ledger in detail, but good transition. So one of the slides I have here towards the end, after I have all the screenshots to everything else, is kind of like my thoughts about, okay, why does this even exist? And how does this compare to the other products that are out there? So number one, this was just released February 2024. The main thing is it's a $20 alternative to $30 Simple Start. So essentially, in the QuickBooks Online world, the only way for you to get into QuickBooks Online, it was $360 a year. Now we're at $240 a year. I believe it's like $210 when you buy, when you pay a whole year in advance. So it's a lower cost alternative to QuickBooks Online. The next thing is, and this is probably the most important part, QuickBooks Self-Employed was not popular across accountants. It was actually, I would dare to say, it was truly deeply hated across accountant. Every single time I had a client as a tax professional that sent me a self-employed report, I just cringed. And then when they said, "Oh, you can look at my QBO, everything's in there," and it wasn't QBO, it was this other weird thing that had no accountant tools, no reclassification tools, no reconcile, no. So it's like I understand as an accountant how I would just be completely repelled by this thing. So I get it's a rebrand, but it's a rebrand of the same sort of thing. But remember, there's 30 million small businesses and there's 1 million accountants, like, and not even, maybe 500,000 accountants. So like, whose opinion does QuickBooks really truly care about, right? Who's a bigger customer, right? So it doesn't matter what you think about this, but it's a chance for a rebrand, I guess.
Do you know, Hector, if they're going to be taking the self-employed and moving them over to Solopreneur? Is
that's so I asked a product manager this question. I got two parts of the answer, the one I can give you and the one that I can't. The one I can give you is they're looking at the possibility of seeing what this will look like, because two platforms cannot exist at the same time. And the other part that's more like wait and see is very hard to do, because if they had figured that out, they would have figured out how to go from self-employed to Simple Start, which they never figured out. So they're at a point where they gotta work towards getting rid of self-employed at some point. Maybe it'll take a year, maybe it'll take 5 years, but what they want is to be in a single ecosystem, which makes sense.
Maybe that's the point of the export, the Excel import. Maybe there's a point to that where at some point you'll be able to download the stuff and like go and like manually do it or something like that. But cut your losses on the old and move to the new one, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll run a quick poll. while I keep going through these. So for Intuit is very difficult to support multiple platforms. So like for tech support, this is going to be great. When everybody's QuickBooks kind of behaves the same regardless of what version they're in. And we're likely to see an upgrade path. Like this has not been announced or been told, or I have not seen the roadmap, but everything points to that there will be an upgrade path, because if you're putting them in a single platform, the point is that you can go from solopreneur to, what's the opposite of solo? Companionpreneur. Okay. So like the idea is that somebody can be a startup and eventually have employees and eventually become a real business. So not having an upgrade path would just be completely idiotic from a programmatically and strategic standpoint. So like I would put all my money on the fact that there will be an upgrade path. Now, the other place I would put my money on would be that there will unlikely be a downgrade path. So like if somebody's on Simple Start, I want to go down to Solopreneur, I doubt that. If somebody's on QuickBooks Ledger, I want to switch to Solopreneur, I doubt that. And also, I don't think there will be a desktop to Solopreneur path, although it's really not that hard to do because it's the same QBO platform. And we also don't know if there will be apps ever connected. What I do know is you can attach QB payments to your invoices. You can attach QuickBooks checking, and of course you can attach TurboTax Live. The questions I have outstanding, the questions that we don't know is, and this was the very first question you asked, Matt, right there. Will self-employed be converted to to Solopreneur? Will it even be possible ever? Will it be more of a light conversion, like here's like your beginning balances or whatever? Will accountants ever have access to Solopreneur? I'm guessing they will, but that again, it has not been announced yet. Third question I have is, will accountants be able to reconcile banks, access chart of accounts, run balance sheet, all these things that QBO can do, but Solopreneur structurally can't? The other question I have is, will accountants have a 30% pro advisor discount if they were to add their clients, to their client list via their QuickBooks Online accountant portal? So will they be able to do that? Will Solopreneur ever have access to a vendor list so we can eventually have an expenses by vendor type of report? So that's another question I have. Next question I have is, will Solopreneur ever add bills? Which sounds like it makes no sense, because then it would be too close to Simple Start, but you can attach another service to that, QB bill payment. So I'm sure that Intuit is in this weird rock in a hard place where they see the shiny object of being able to attach another product to it, but then but then we don't create such a differentiation with Simple Start. So that's going to be a weird one to watch develop. Will they add bills to it? In my opinion, they shouldn't. They should just let this be an income only thing. But I would like to see vendors. I always want to see vendors no matter what. And the last question is, will Solopreneur ever have 1099 contractor tracking, which of course without vendors you can't, or the ability to add a payroll in the future? What I do think is going to happen for the first time ever is we might see a very interesting execution of what's a purely business owner focused product versus a backend for the accountant, where the accountant will have access to things that the business owner will not. So what I think will eventually happen, and this is all speculation, is that when they have the ability to add an accountant to this, accountants can reconcile, accountants can modify the chart of accounts, accountants can modify the front-facing category list, accountants will be able to run balance sheets, accountants will be able to add vendors, accountants, you know what I mean? So like what I think is long-term is that accountants will have access to all the complicated things, and customers will have access to only the simple things. And that's going to be very interesting to watch grow. Although I'm certain that accountants are automatically going to not like it, because that's how we are. We always not like things. But yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I think what this does is it actually opens up a new lower level that is the whole ecosphere, the Intuit sphere, as I like to call it, continues to grow and improve. They've got a new reset of a lower piece to start adding these lower features on. So Simple Start is going to probably continue to improve, add new things on, but they've introduced this lower level to start doing these new connection pieces and still keep it a lower price.
Okay. I think there's a dog that needs to be walked, Matthew.
Yeah, I'll be.
Uh,
He's telling me
so
that.
I have a slide here, and we have I have a full spreadsheet where I compare all versions of QBO. But this slide I only did it to compare Ledger, Solopreneur, and Simple Start, just to get a good understanding. Ledger is actually a different product altogether that I will not be covering in this webinar. But QuickBooks Ledger is the accountant only version of like kind of Solopreneur for $10 a month. But what's funny is QuickBooks Ledger is actually the no customers. It's got all the reports, it's got vendors, it's got 1099, it's got the ability to add payroll. But Solopreneur, it's all sales stuff. So it's all like sales, invoices, estimates, payments, and nothing to do with vendors or expense or contractors or on the expense side. So you got QuickBooks Ledger, which is highly focused on banking, bank rules, full accounting reports, and sort of vendor expense tracking, where Solopreneur don't care about vendor expense tracking, has this very light, easy to use banking, no registers, no reconcile, and full access to invoices. So it's interesting to see these two compared hand in hand. The only thing that Ledger and Solopreneur kind of have in common is they both have basic bank feeds, they both do profit and loss, they both have business owner access, and that's it. Everything else seems to be like sort of opposite products, a Solopreneur and Ledger. And of course, Simple Start is full-blown accounting software. So you can click on the link that's on the description. I had now added Solopreneur as my comparison chart. This chart's been existing for like 5 years at this point. And on a tab here in the bottom, I have just the Ledger versus Solopreneur versus Simple Start comparison. So hopefully you're using these resources, because like nobody else creates this level of detailed resources out there. Even the mighty Matthew, like even can't keep track of all the resources that
I didn't even
create.
realize
So
how much you've added to this thing, Hector. Like I pulled it up earlier so I could have it ready. Oh my gosh, man! Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
insane.
yeah. I don't sleep too much. Anyway, all right. So quick announcement here, and I won't get into the details here. This slide basically adds all the things that we added to Right Tool, which is the add-on that I co-developed with Mark Corum, that enhances your QuickBooks Online experience. So since the last webinar, since the last quarter, we've added like 15 new features to Right Tool. I don't want to get too much deep into it. If you don't use Right Tool right now, you're living under a rock. Go to Right Tool app, check it out. It'll change your life, whether you're in the free version or the pro version. Okay, so let's go into QuickBooks Online new features. So now in QuickBooks Online, regular QuickBooks Online, whether Simple Start, Essentials, whatever, if you choose that you are a sole proprietor, and that's a key element, you have to choose that you're a sole proprietor in the settings. And by the way, you can do that even if you're not. Like you're not going to go to the tax form police, because you chose the wrong thing in QBO. So you can go in any QBO file. You just try it now. Go to any QBO file, change it to sole proprietor in the tax form. Then go in the taxes tab and click on income tax. You'll see that entire income tax page that contains the self-employment tax estimate that I showed you, that is natural or native to Solopreneur. Okay. The next big thing that's worth announcing, and I believe this was released mid-January of 2024, is QuickBooks Online no longer suggests a transfer. And you're now seeing a little sign at the top that says, thank you for your feedback, because myself, Matthew, everybody on this call has probably given into a feedback to get rid of the stupid, I have to call it stupid, although I don't like to resort to that language. As a father of 4 kids, I should never be saying that word. But the stupid concept of uncategorized asset, like they're just finally in the process of killing it, which I think is huge. So when you go into, I'm going to switch over to a different company file here, so I can kind of show you, and you can experience live here. You go to log back in. Give me a chance how I move on to next version of QuickBooks here. All right, so I'm gonna go into regular QuickBooks Online file, and then I'm gonna go into bank feeds and kind of show you. And if you may have to remember this, because if they changed this like a week ago, And it might be to a point that we completely forgot about this concept. But essentially, traditionally, anytime we used to see the word transfer, credit, sometimes like Venmo, like there would be some weird things that, Zelle, PayPal, any of these type of wording, Stripe, PayPal, sometimes what would happen is QuickBooks would suggest a transfer. And to make things even worse, it would suggest uncategorized asset. And actually, what makes things even worse is it will categorize a transfer to another bank account and it will look right, but it's not right. So it's even worse. So the interesting thing about sort of the workflow, what happened now is, and this is going to be funny, anytime you see category or match empty, that's when it used to suggest uncategorized assets. So now you know at this point until QuickBooks figures out what to put, because they figured out how to take out the uncategorized asset suggestion, but they don't know what to put in its behalf. Okay, so now you're seeing for the first time empty category suggestions, not like the wrong category, it just means no category suggestions. And if you try to click on add, it'll give you an error saying, hey, you can't do a transaction without a category. Okay, yeah, I knew that. But the transfers that still exist are going to be the paired transfer. So if it does detect a paired transfer, those will be in there, right? So paired transfers will continue to work. Of course, you can unpair it manually, but there will no longer be a random transfer being suggested when it's truly supposed to be a transfer. And keep in mind, paired transfers can be wrong too. Okay, they can have the wrong date. They can assume that one transaction from one side is the other. So you can still unpair those transfers or switch it to categorized, which switching it to categorized would be the same thing as breaking that transfer. So that's a really big thing. I think it was worth mentioning, worth praising. I think Intuit did a good job at listening to us on this one. The next thing that I would love to see is, you know how you get this big red mark that doesn't let you add something when it's missing an account? I would love for this to happen when you're missing a vendor. So like in this one, for example, I'm missing a vendor. If I click on add, it'll go through. So it would be awesome to kind of follow the same logic and go, hey, can we get it to like also stop you if you're missing a vendor? But that's just me dreaming. It's just a tiny little pipe dream that I have. And maybe it's something we can try to fix with the right tool. It's something we're thinking about how to make that work as well. But we will need that to be prohibited across all QuickBooks files for this to be truly effective. The other thing they added, which is super interesting, is after you categorize the transaction, and they're here under this categorize tab, you can now bulk edit transactions after you've categorized them from this screen. Okay, so for example, we see all these Adobes, and I'm gonna shift click to all these Adobe Pro, and it looks like all these things are going into telephone expense. I can simply click on edit and then change the category here to, software or whatever it is, right? Software, whatever the account is. Maybe dues and subscriptions, whatever category you have, that you want to change it to. Now you can also
add the pay names right there.
Yeah, you can add the payee name if the payee name is missing. You can add class, you can add location. You cannot add tags for some weird reason. I don't know why they would keep tags out, but so you got all that stuff. Now, I gave public praise to Intuit for this. This is awesome. The one thing I kind of hate about this is I can't tell what payee I used originally. So like I don't know that I need to change the payee. You understand what I'm saying? So like in this screen, okay, so in this screen, I see what the bank detail is. I see what the category is. I see the date, I see the amount, I see that it was brought by a rule, but I don't know what payee I used in the first place. So how am I supposed to know that I have to fix it? I guess the only workflow where this would make sense is if I were to maybe I'll come in here and I'll add all these Amorinos here that are missing a vendor. So I'll select all these Amorinos. Maybe I clicked on edit. Maybe I put this on the right category. Let's say meals. Okay, working meals. And I clicked on apply. And I enter them and I accepted them. And I go, oh crap, I forgot to put a payee. Then I guess contextually I would go, okay, let me go back into categorize. Let me go search for my Amorinos. Okay, and then come in here, select all, click on edit, and then add the payee. Okay, so so in this context, it could work. But in the context that I like 10 minutes pass by and I have no clue what I did 10 minutes ago, I would have no context as to know what's missing a vendor here. Okay, so I think that's kind of broken. It's a bad design from their part. But I'm telling you, I've been very loud about this in the last 2 weeks, and this webinar as well. Trust me, this will get fixed. Magically, you're going to see a vendor column there come in very soon. And I would like to see a separate account column too, and a class and a location. Because again, if I don't know what is being categorized already, I don't know contextually how to fix it. And I could just use my regular reclassified tools that accountants have, which note, if you're not an accountant, then that's awesome, right? You have a batch categorization tool. If you're an accountant, you're pinning that or comparing that against a tool like this, where you do see the class, where you do see the location, where you do see the vendor, the customer, all that stuff. So of course, I'm being a little bratty because I'm used to having a tool like this where I have some of the information. But the one thing that's different about this, and I'm going to give you some silver lining, is in this screen, in the classic reclassify screen, you don't know what the source account is. Like, I don't know which credit card I paid from, what bank account I paid from. So that piece of context is missing from this screen. But randomly, however, it kind of works on the new bank transactions screen. Let me show you. When I click on categorized, okay, I know I'm on this screen. I know that I'm working on Chase 4660. I know I'm working on the old Chase 1234. I contextually know. But what's really cool about this, and this is like a tiny little Easter egg that they added, which I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't have even thought about this. Like, this is something that they totally 100% surprised me with, this out of left field thinking. And Matthew, you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Thanks to you and your video, the very bottom, right? It's the all accounts.
No, and also they moved it from the bottom to the top now. So when you click on the account drop down, there's a little thing here that says all accounts. And what's really cool about this is if you actually go into categorized and then switch over to all accounts, what's going to happen is you're going to get your categorized transactions across all banks and credit cards. That's pretty cool. I would love to be able to choose, like, hey, only credit cards or only banks or something like that. But come on, I'm asking for too much at this point. But what's cool about this is, like, I can see which is the source account for these transactions. And sometimes the source account matters. Like, we have all these 7-Elevens, and I know for a fact that 7-Eleven 1234 is the owner's credit card. So when I edit this, maybe I make this personal. Okay. But when it's not the Amex, when it's this, Chase or whatever, I know that's always a business owner. One of the employees, for example. And then in this particular case, I'm gonna put this into my gas or whatever, or out of my vehicle gas and fuel account. So I love. I love the fact that with the source account, I now get extra depth to categorizing this. Again, if I could see the vendor name, if I could see the account name, the class and location and customer job, even, it'll be pretty cool. All in this screen, that would give me so much more additional context, and it will make this reclassify screen more powerful than the traditional reclassify screen. I will add a couple things. You can sort by date, you can sort by bank detail, you can sort by amount, you can sort by this added match, but you can't sort by account. Can't sort by account. Okay, or can you? No, I can't sort by account. So it doesn't matter how hard you click, or how much travel you go from, like, all the way down to the bottom. You can't sort by account, and that is from a UI perspective, that is horrible. Like, you never want to have a table where some things can be sorted and some cannot, because a user cannot comprehend that. Like, I cannot comprehend that I can sort this but not sort that. Like, so that's a big design flaw out of this, that again, it's probably can be fixed fairly easy. But the one thing I do like is that they added this little thing. So now I can click on this little drop down and go to missing payee or customer. So even though I don't get to see the payee, I do know the payee is missing. So that's something. So at least it's not useful for me to correct it, but useful for me to add missing things. So that's cool having that little filter there. And they also added the regular search filter. So if I'm looking for Starbucks or whatever, I can put star and then see all my Starbucks categories, and I can kind of see, how things are being categorized across the board, all my Starbucks. So there is, I think, this screen, because of the other tools that banking brings along, the dates, this little filter here, the memo, because of the context of all these other tools, this screen, again, with this little drop down here that says all accounts, all of a sudden is really, really powerful and potentially about to be the most powerful feature in entire QuickBooks Online. Matt, what do you think?
There's one other sneaky little thing you can do with that. Since you can go to all accounts, if you actually select the checkbox for all, you can export to Excel, and you would be able to now export all transactions across all accounts into one Excel file if you need to do something with that data externally.
Oh, that's interesting. So I can go here, export to Excel.
Yep.
Now, will it go across all my pages?
It's when I've done in the past, I believe it did. You'd click the top box and make it as large as you can, and then it will export as, you probably don't have to change it to from 50 to you've got 400. So I've done that in the past and took everything for the whole time out.
Yeah, it's just gonna be limited to 300. That's the only challenge. Still not bad. You would do one export. You would get the first 300 on one export, and then you will go to the second page and go to export and get the next. Yeah, I wish that the programmers would assume that when you export something, you want all the pages automatically. So you're gonna have to open a bunch of these things, 300 at a time, and copy and paste into a new sheet to do that. But either case, I think it's a good ad, Matthew, very good ad. And in here we can, through some QuickBooks magic, we could probably get rid of some of the stuff and just get the actual, extract the category name out of it. Although again, I would like to see the category cleanly by itself. I don't need to see added to, expense, all these other crap that they add to it. But yeah, it's good addition to that, Matt. Thank you. I didn't even think of that as an added value. Okay. Next piece here worth mentioning is QuickBooks Online 1099s finally gets corrections. I put a little video walkthrough link in there. Eventually, when you click on 1099 filings and you see all your 1099s that have already been mailed, they have to be mailed. Like, they have to be like completely filed and accepted, mailed, all that. You'll be able to click on correct. And once you click on correct, it'll take you to the next screen to make changes to it. Now, what's interesting on it, and I don't have the next screenshot, is that when you click on correct, you don't actually get to put the new dollar amount or put the new address or put the new social security number. You're supposed to make that change in your core accounting. Like, you go and you add a check that was missing, or you categorize a check that was missing. Then you can click on correct and it'll recalculate the 1099 for you based on the information that's in QuickBooks. So you don't just get to open up a 1099 NEC amended and change whatever box you want. So that's an interesting workflow that's different than like any other way that you would correct a 1099. Next thing to mention, I won't spend too much time on this. QuickBooks has a new partnership with a company called Mineral. So if you have QBO payroll, you're now going to see this thing called the HR advisor. And if you are on payroll core, you only get like these sort of text files and templates. But if you are on premium or elite, you can actually talk to an HR advisor. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know why we need to talk to an HR advisor. I guess most business owners, when they have an HR question, they call me and ask me, how can I fire so-and-so without getting sued? It's like, okay, I don't know. But that's typically the most like typical HR question. Like, can I take benefits away because I can't afford them anymore? That sort of thing. Can I fire this person? Or that sort of thing. Next thing to mention is now there's balance sheet budgets. So you can run a budget by P&L. You can run a budget by balance sheet. Nothing interesting to report there. The only thing that's different is that, and actually that's worth demoing. I'm going to go into my financial planning, go into budgets, and kind of show that. So when you go create a budget, and this is in Plus and Advanced, by the way, when you go create a budget, you have the option to choose balance sheet, which could be done yearly, quarterly, or monthly, or profit and loss. And what's different is on the profit and loss side, you do get the option to go between consolidated and subdivided. And subdivided allows you to do a P&L budget by location and choose a specific location or a specific group of locations. You can do it by class, pick a specific class or a whole bunch of classes, or by customers, pick a bunch of customers. Note, you cannot do projects. You can do customers, but no projects. Why? I don't know. Great question to ask. You know, the powers that be. Why can I do customers and no projects? So everything you're seeing here is both plus and advanced. And then when I go to next, you get to then use your regular tool to do this. What's worth mentioning about the recent updates to the budget tool is that if you have multiple up here, then you get to choose, you know, which customer you're going to be doing the budget for, and you basically quickly swap across all the customers you're doing budgets for. If you select multiple accounts, like I said, we'll select all these here. You can do batch actions. So I grab a bunch of accounts, click on batch actions, and I can click on copy reference data. So actually, let me go and do, because I don't have reference data for regular budgets, but let me do a regular P&L budget and show you, because that's pretty cool. So we have the reference data comparison. If there's any historical numbers with any of these things. So for example, this parent sales account has, you know, some actuals. Okay, but we haven't done a budget yet, but we do have reference data. So if I select this and click on copy reference data and click OK, it would actually overwrite whatever is in your history of that month. If you're doing it by month, or if you do it by quarter, it will overwrite whatever's on that history and put it in there for you. So sometimes it's a good starting point to kind of just select everything and then just copy reference data. So essentially you start your budget with whatever it was last year, or whatever the actuals were, or whatever the reference point is. You can show and hide the reference data if you want to. And the reference data could be, you have a bunch of options for reference data, okay, which is pretty interesting too. You can even use another budget as a reference data, which is interesting too. So a lot of little things that they added here that are good. If you're searching for a particular account, you're looking for, like to say that one marketing expense, it will scroll you to that account too. That's also pretty interesting. On advanced only, you can click on edit on spreadsheet, and it'll open up in this thing called spreadsheet sync, which I've never done a video for. I never planned to do a video for. It's this big waste of time and frustrating thing for me. I've never been pro spreadsheet sync, because it causes more anxiety than actually helps. So I'll leave it there. I guess I'll leave it there on that mini rant. Let me see what else is worth mentioning on budgets. That's it. So on QuickBooks Online Accountant, they added this new thing called client apps, and essentially you get to see what apps all your clients are using, or what apps they have active. That's useful, I think. And then that's all we're going to say about that. And then on QuickBooks Online Advanced, we have the new forecasting. That's worth mentioning, because that's pretty cool. Go back here to forecasting. By the way, Matthew, you have anything to say on the budget side? Anything you liked about the budget side, copy reference data, any of that stuff?
No, I mean, unfortunately, everything I've always heard about budgets, most people find that they get stuck at some point trying to utilize it, getting data in, or being able to manipulate it. So I've kind of stayed away from it. Truly, I just haven't used it much.
Yeah. The reality is that budget building is a spreadsheet tool. What happened to my browser? Budget building is a spreadsheet thing. Like almost never you'll see somebody excited about building a budget on something other than a spreadsheet, something that doesn't have formulas, or copy down, drag that down. Anything that doesn't have a spreadsheet level power to it is just a bunch of fields to add text to, and that's just it's a very daunting task. So most of the times, anytime a budget experience can be made quasi pleasant is when you're able to bring this stuff from Excel. But the challenge is that Excel could be unstructured too, so it's very difficult to define exactly what's the best way to bring in spreadsheets. If you're going to import budget, One thing I do like, which is kind of worth mentioning, is that in QuickBooks Online, and this is super smart, super duper smart. In QuickBooks Online, if you go through the budget import process, you can download this thing called P&L budget template. And this is the first time ever that you've seen QuickBooks generate, let me bring this over from the other screen. You've seen QuickBooks generate a template based on your file. So it's not a generic whatever template. It's a template that actually includes your information. So if you actually look at this, let me put this 300% here. The template that it gave me is my chart of accounts template. Okay, that's never been done before. Okay, now what I kind of don't like about this is a bit inconsistent. Is this chart of accounts uses this weird indentation? Like I would have so wished that they would have used like a full account path, you know, like it would look sort of like this. I wish they would have done something like this. Okay, that way we have a more flat sort of type of, like I wish it would have done this way. But hey, long story short, if they're able to make it work without having this type of formatting, fine. But what's nice about it is it creates a spreadsheet for you. So if you kind of get accustomed to using their spreadsheet first as a sort of source of truth, a sort of starting point, I think you will have a pleasant experience for importing budgets. And you can import P&Ls, you cannot import balance sheets. So I want to also point that out, that we talked about the new balance sheet budgets as a thing, but you cannot import balance sheet budgets. You can only import P&L budgets. Now, when you go into forecast, which is in the same section as budgets, you can create a forecast. And what's cool about creating a forecast is it will automate the numbers for you. So let's say I want to do a forecast for the next 3 years, and it can do up to 3 years. And I can say, hey, actually use my numbers from last fiscal year. Or I can say, use the average for the last 12 months, or use the average of the last 9 months, or use the average of the last 6 months. It'll be cool for you to put custom and say, use the average of this specific period. That would be awesome, but that's not there. So we get these here. And then once you take a particular period that you're going to use as your baseline, and again, worth mentioning, forecasts are advanced only. You can also say, you know what? Let's increase my sales by 10%, increase my COGS by 20%, decrease my expenses by 5%, my other income decrease it by, let's say, 10%, and my other expenses increase it by 25% or something like that. So you create this sort of like basic rules where it'll take the average of the last 9 months. Imagine that going into like a single column in Excel, and then dividing that, you know, by 12, so you know what your monthly is, and then go in there and project in the future all the increases. So when I click on next, it creates the P&L for me, and notice that we're using the same as the next couple months, and it's increasing based on whatever the number was, I guess the same exact period, and that's how it's projecting out into the future. Now, I would love to know the math. I would love to be able to click and see how the math is calculated, because it's not always very obvious, like how these numbers are coming along. Like, for example, see, this number is high and then it comes low. Like, how did that happen? You know, like I would love to be able to click and see the formula, but you can't. You kind of have to take it with what they give you. There's also this batch actions button here that allows you to clear the data. So there's no longer copy from reference point, because that's what the previous screen was, the reference data. And then you can save the forecast, and that's it. Big important point here: forecasts don't have reports. So there's no forecast versus actual. There's no forecast report. To be able to see the report, you have to turn the forecast into a budget. Okay, so that's the logic that they apply to that. So there's no forecast reports. There's only budget versus actual reports. And the forecast is just a tool for you to create a budget with forecasted data. So essentially, at the end of the day, they're all the same. The forecast and the budgets are the same, and it all boils down to budgets. And also, you cannot import a forecast. So it's always going to be based on your actual numbers and that projection out into the future. Okay, hold on one second here. Matt, you want to add some comments?
One of the questions I wanted to ask you was on the forecasting, they still listed the different sub accounts like under income. If you clicked onto those and played with those numbers, can you assign your own amounts into those sub accounts, and would that change your forecast? Do you know?
Let's try it out. So that's in forecast. So if I go into forecast and I go to create a new custom forecast, and
so once you're in it, because here it's just the bulk numbers of everything, right?
Yeah, this is just like the starting point. So once you have them in here, the question is, if I go to any specific month.
So you've got your sales and services, sales discounts, those sub accounts with the check boxes. If you check the box, can you put anything into those rows? No.
There's no way to like put, put $500 across all. No, you can't do that. Like the check boxes are only for you to clear the data. So if I put,
put 1,000 there.
Yeah, I could put any number here manually, and then my total net sales here in the bottom. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't bubble up. Yeah, you mean that bubble up that you get with,
actually total net sales at the bottom, I did change to that. So you can customize a bit more if you wanted to see better breakout of what your forecast would be across your different sales amounts. So total net sales right below that, it's adding, it would change your forecast, which is cool.
Correct. And you can also put stuff on the parent account. So if you want to ignore the sub accounts, you can just put something in the parent account and just kind of focus on that parent account. The problem is that parent account still subtotals here to the bottom. So you would have to make sure you would have to clear all the subs to be able to do that. Like I wish that QuickBooks was a little bit more anal about allowing people to use parent accounts, but that's just one of the kind of drawbacks there. So it's not super duper obvious. Yeah. Okay. And then let's see, we cover that. Okay. And then the last part here is QuickBooks Online Advanced customers now received 3 new reports that are project-based reports. One of them is an estimates versus actuals by project, which I don't like the look of it. I like the desktop one better. It's just this weird sort of quasi spreadsheet format, still not very conducive to good analysis, but it's there. They added a work in progress by project report, which the desktop had. So you can actually see work in progress is a very complex topic, but work in progress essentially takes the estimated cost, the actual cost divided by the estimated cost, figures out what the accounting progress of the not like how the building looks. If the building looks 25% or 75%, this is the cost of building the building, and then based on that percentage, then it'll project what your earned income is, which is different than what you've actually physically invoiced or usually got paid, because there's always timing differences in accounting. So the work in progress is a very, very valuable report. I have tested it. I'm still not 100% satisfied with the way it works, but it's on the right direction. Like right now, as of right now today, I would not move any of my enterprise clients into QBO Advanced because this work in progress report came out. I can tell them that it looks like we will eventually, but I've done enough testing where I'm not liking the results of it. But very soon, people will feel safe with moving a desktop client to online advanced because of these reports for the construction clients.
They're closing the gap, making it closer, right?
Yeah, that's probably the best term. And the estimates and progress invoice summary by project. Okay, so we finished with 5 minutes ahead of time. Matt, can we go through the questions? Are there any questions unanswered?
So I've been trying to answer them throughout most of the stuff here. Well, estimates ever use categories rather than just products was the last one that came through. I haven't seen that ability. So your categories, you mean the ability to have a category and the product onto there, both showing? I don't know, possible.
Category and product, like in a sales report, or you're talking about in the
estimates?
No.
You mean like for budget versus estimate, Melissa? Maybe a little more context.
Who asked that question?
Melissa Calhoun was asking.
Let's go step by step here. So Let's go to reports. And was it on the estimate versus actuals? And this one, you think is the one that they asked for?
I think that's what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the estimate versus actual, you get project name, you get account, you get product and service, and then you get the estimate versus actual for each of the line items. I guess the question is, can we show the item category? So generally on these new advanced reports, you would have the ability to pull up any field and pivot through that. But this specific report cannot be edited. You can filter by certain pieces of information, but there's no way for me to add a new dimension of the product category if I wanted to group it like that.
Yeah.
Assuming that's what she was asking.
Yeah. Well, so creating estimates only allows products. So I don't see it that way either. So there's another question that's popping in right now from Jolene. QBO projects would require us to use QBO payroll, right? Yuck. So for projects, ultimately, the best way, if you're really trying to get the time from each person pulled in, it does require QuickBooks time with QuickBooks Online Payroll to do it the best job way possible, because that's how you're going to grab the wages and pull stuff in. There are other ways using their hourly cost calculator to kind of grow, like to build that,
I can add some flavor to that. So when you run a profit and loss by project, so if I do a project profit and loss by customer in this case, when I run a profit and loss by customer, only when I actually post something into my books, so either a check, a bill, or a payroll check, I will have payroll costs being booked into the actual project. I may not have a good example here, but if I want any of my payroll costs, so let's say, for example, if I have a direct cost here called, let's say I have a direct labor or something like that. So if I wanted direct labor to post into a P&L by customer or P&L by project type of report, I would need to have an actual transaction. So it would need to be a check, it needs to be a bill, it needs to be a payroll check. If you're running payroll through some third-party payroll company, and when you bring everything in through, let's say, a journal entry, if that journal entry is not posting into the job or project, you're never going to see this in the P&L. So the kind of side question was, what if I use a third-party payroll company? I don't use QBO payroll, but I am entering the time of my employees in a timesheet. Okay. So if I am entering the time of my employees in a timesheet like this, where I'm actually selecting the project and I'm selecting all this stuff, and there's here in the bottom on check billable, here in the bottom, it tells me what the hours are. If let me see, if Andrea, an employee, yeah. So if I have set up in Andrea's profile, if I set up her cost, her I don't even know what word to use, her fully burdened payroll cost, I can actually, once I load it into a timesheet, I can actually see it on that report. Let me go back here for a second, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So in this report, and this is actually fairly new, on this estimate versus actual by project, if I actually click on general options, here it says payroll cost. It means that if I run QuickBooks Online Payroll, it will actually show me the payroll costs that are being assigned to the jobs, just like a P&L would do. But if I don't run payroll and I choose hourly costs, it will take the hourly cost, the hourly burden cost of that employee, even if I didn't run payroll, and it would throw it in this report. So even though it doesn't show in the P&L by customer or P&L by project, it will show it here because it's using this thing called hourly cost. So hopefully that answered that question. I mean, it's a question that requires maybe an hour, 1 hour webinar to kind of discover all the context, but it happens here too in the project section when you switch from hourly cost to payroll expense. Again, the hourly cost is based on what cost you give to each employee. That's a burden cost. You give the fully burdened cost you give to each employee, and this is without regard of what runs through payroll. This is just timesheet based. Okay. All right. Any more? I don't think there's any more questions, right, Matthew? I think we can end it.
I tried to go through a whole bunch as we were going along. So most of the stuff I tried to answer for everybody. So It looks like we got everything. Of course, if you guys have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help where we can, of course.
Yeah, awesome, man. Hey, Matthew, thank you very much for joining me. It's always more fun to do it with someone, get some color commentary and get some live reaction to some of these things. There's my email if you feel I didn't cover something. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next quarter for the next quarterly updates.
Thanks, Hector.
Bye, everybody.